Everyone, joining me today are Shane Gronniger, CEO of GCS Technologies, and Marty Satterfield, GCS's Chief Revenue Officer. GCS is an Austin-based managed IT and cybersecurity firm that works with small to mid-sized businesses. Today, we're talking about AI, but not the way you've probably heard it discussed before. We're not here to talk about chatbots or content generators. We're talking about what happens when AI starts touching your actual business operations, your security stack, your data, your workflows, your risk profile. AI is coming up in every meeting and water cooler conversation, and the questions are fundamentally different than they were a year ago. So Shane and Marty are going to walk us through what they're seeing out in the field, where AI is helping, where it's creating new risk, and what business leaders should be paying attention to right now. So let's go ahead and get into it. Who is GCS and what are the kinds of problems that you guys solve?
I'd say first and foremost, we're a people business. We over a technology business, right? Technology is a means to an end to help our customers get to where they're going. But for 25 years that we've been doing this, it's really built around the relationship, the trust and loyalty that comes with not just being, not just responding, reacting, but being proactive, being a true partner. One of the things we say a lot to our customers is it's a team sport, right? It's a partnership. And so it's got to work both ways. It's got to be good communication. And so that's what we do, right?
Well, and, we're a people-first organization. There's a lot of great technology that can help insulate businesses from their clients, make it harder to find. We differentiate by answering the phone live and having some traditional values while optimizing tech at the same time. The business changes every 3 or 4 years, as does technology, and we adapt with that. But in our 26 years, the one core value of chosen family has caused us to always be a human-first organization.
Okay. Why do you think, AI has been around for the last few years. Why do you think AI has suddenly become part of every conversation that you guys are having?
I think because it finally, it's not philosophical anymore. It's here, and it's in everybody's hands. The consumerization of it has led to mass adoption. And I don't even want to say adoption, maybe it's more mass access, because there is a big gap right now between access and adoption. But Microsoft has sold a lot of Copilot licenses. But if you looked at 8 out of 10 of those businesses, there's probably not a lot of difference in workflow changes or anything else, right? With Claude and just everything in the news around AI, you can't open your eyes, right, or blink or read anything, whether it's on X or Reddit or YouTube, wherever you get your news, it's AI, it's in your face every day. And so there is this feeling, I think, of if you're not doing something, I think it's true. If you're not doing something, you're falling behind.
Well, I think it's, the consumerization, the mass exposure to Copilot. And, big tech leverages consumerization more than ever. I mean, grandma knows how to Zoom now after COVID, who would have thought grandma would ever be able to figure out she can't even get Netflix going, but by God, if she's talking to the grandkids, she's going to figure out how to Zoom. And so AI has been living in our consumerized inboxes, and we've played with it. We've scheduled vacations around it, and we've used it and touched it, but now we're kind of running into the intersection of where does that consumerized experience meet the business and optimize the business. And so whether it's governance, whether it's optimization, whether it's third-party integration, there's a whole lot to the story, but it's all been teased to us through the adoption in our consumerized personal workspace.
Yeah. Have you noticed conversations sort of evolving, the questions that are being asked over the last year? Have they changed?
I would say that there weren't conversations or questions really being asked. And that's the difference now, is that everybody's now wanting to talk about it. Everybody's ready to talk about it. Copilot and even Claude, right, a year ago weren't as mature as they are today, And so we're just seeing a lot of mass adoption now. And so previously, before, people were just looking to either have it blocked, right? They were afraid of it. Yeah. And now everybody's like really getting pretty deep down certain rabbit holes on how to deploy it. And we've encountered quite a few, customers that are already running with the scissors, if you will.
Well, we get 2 different flavors of clients. We've got clients that have a technical aptitude and they understand that they're introducing a very free-ranging technology to their organization, and they have a stewardship. They have a responsibility. They don't want those bots just running loose, and there's some governance. And so we're getting more sophisticated questions, but then we're also getting the clients I talked to the other day that had dumped her NetSuite information into ChatGPT, real excited about the pretty pictures, but they just took their shiniest treasure, all their financial information, and they put it into an open platform. And so the conversations are, sometimes don't run with scissors, and then sometimes they're more sophisticated, more governed, and more thoughtful, if you will. And so I think for GCS, leaning into assisting our clients optimize their customer experiences, their production experiences, while at the same time helping guide them into the gutters needed to govern in a responsible way the powerful tool that AI is becoming.
Yeah. Ever evolve. I mean, there's got to be a balance there, right? Like the safest option is to eliminate all AI usage. The organizations that are probably going to be the most successful open it up a lot more. Obviously, there's data and privacy concerns within that gradient, but I guess you guys help them sort of decide where they fall in that.
Blocking everything is a dead approach, right? Because everyone has a cell phone. We have personal accounts, right? When I say we, just employees in general. We have access to this stuff. They're going to get access to it regardless. And if they do it that way, you're going to have even less visibility than you would have had before. Opening it up to everyone is a breach waiting to happen, right? So there is a middle ground that we're all trying to find here, and in helping spur adoption of this stuff, but doing it responsibly.
Yeah. Where are you seeing AI save the most time or sort of reduce some of the noise in day-to-day operations successfully for some of your clients?
I see it both ways. I see it being an incredible distraction for a lot of our clients. They're trying to, we all showed up with brains and with gut, and, there's a reason that we are in the positions that we are here. And I see more and more of my clients replacing their brain with this bot brain. And that's a shame. I think that care needs to be placed on maintaining the human element that's made us all successful and gotten us to where we are. But by the same token, I've got clients that are using it to measure heavy equipment inventory and how many hours a month that these heavy duty tools aren't being utilized, and how do they optimize the utilization of them? So it can be everything from a distraction and, off the subject to, being a very powerful way to manage your business.
What do you think's being oversold versus what's genuinely useful right now? Y'all seeing any examples of that?
Yeah, I think the automation components of it, right, are being oversold. 10x your leads, your sales pipeline. There's so many shiny objects and tools out there that are promising, ROI on certain things. And I think, maybe that is to come as things mature. But right now, we're not looking at AI as a product necessarily as much as it is a layer that we can implement in our business and in our customers', businesses to help improve efficiency, right? Whether it be automating certain tasks, whether it be superpowering existing employees to do their jobs even better.
Well, it's kind of like going to the produce section of H-E-B, and you've got all these different vegetables and fruits that you can pick from. And what we're finding is, you can talk a little bit about shadow IT, but what we're finding is there hasn't been consolidation. One of the things that we really dig about Microsoft is that everything's siloed within it. They're building tools within it. They're building governance within it. But, with shadow IT, you can have 18 different flavors of AI running within your ecosystem and not even know it.
Right. And shadow IT just being that not knowing what people are using, right? Everyone's just kind of deciding to install that app or use this app. And so that shadow AI term is now being tossed around a lot too. It's the same concept, right? It's if you block everything, they're going to figure out a way to do it anyway. If you allow it all, then how are you governing who's using it? What are they doing? So when we look at a client environment, that's one of the things that we can easily scan, right? Is we can see what's in use. And we've had lots of situations where clients either thought they knew who was using it and what was being used, and the scan shows us something else completely different. And so it opens up some interesting conversations. And I think it drives towards this, AI acceptable use policy, which is really just communicating to the business, like, here's what we're going to use. Here's how we're going to use it. Here's some of the use cases we want to see, and then find champions, find people that can start adopting these tools in a meaningful way. And I think that's looking at people in certain departments of the company, right, they're doing something every day that we don't have visibility to at leadership level, right, necessarily. It's this mundane task they have to do every week that takes 2 hours. And they can figure out ways to automate those things, right, if you give them the right tools. And so I think, shadow AI, and to me, it's not an IT problem. It's more a signal that you have employees that are trying to use AI tools to do their job in a better way. And the company hasn't really given them a clear, safe path to do so.
Well, and that's one of the benefits of leaning in hard to Microsoft is that, at a glance on our monthly meetings with our security clients, we're able to look at a dashboard that shows by user, by device, all of the different things running upon it. And so, a lot of our clients are, really getting more rigid and cutting things down. A lot of them are surprised. But what we are finding is, like it or not, your employees are noodling on it. And so if they're going to noodle, you don't really want to hedge that ambition, and what they're trying to seek, but you want to build on that curiosity, but you want to do it in a strategic and enterprise-oriented way.
Yeah. You kind of touched a little bit on this, but I want to get a little bit more into the security components. Like, where is data usually being exposed in these AI tools?
Yeah, a lot of different places, right? I mean, you gave us the example earlier of, ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot, any of these experiences where you're chatting and you can upload data, uploading your financials and having them, having a nice, pretty graph and whatever report created. Like that's one example. Where's that data going? Is it being used to train, these other models? And then you have things like Copilot, where, Copilot has the ability to surface any document that an employee has access to. So what you're talking about then is, like, say a 15-year-old business that has employees that have been there a long time. There's all of these stale permissions. There's all this stuff that you have. It's basically just inherited over time, right? That there are permissions you're not aware of anymore. And we all have this problem of managing our data. This whole data governance, layers, that's really the next frontier for all of us. It's not the sexy work. It's not the work anybody wants to do, but it's some of the most important. And so when you give somebody a Copilot license and they can search for a payroll file and find it, that's not a Copilot problem. It's working exactly as it was designed, right? So AI, it's doing its job. And I think AI is not necessarily creating new security problems. It's turning up the volume on security issues and problems that you already had that you've just ignored for years.
That's a really good point. I think in your business, your phone probably rings for new customers when something is broken.
What is that inflection point? What is that trigger? What is causing them to realize they've got a problem?
I think it starts with competitive advantage. What are your competitors doing and what are they automating? And
so they just feel like they're getting behind.
Well, it is a race and they are getting behind. I mean, I can't think of very many industries where AI is not going to be an accelerator. It can also be a distraction, and it can also take you off of your core. Like for us, I will, as long as I'm CRO at GCS, we will answer the phone live, by gosh, during the day, despite all the technology options that I have to keep me from hiring a human. And I think that's one of the big misnomers is that AI is going to replace people. I think AI is here to complement people. Now, I do think if you want to hide behind a keyboard, if you want to hide behind your monitor, you better adopt AI and do it aggressively. If you are able to work in front of the keyboard, if you're able to have conversations with clients, look them in the eye, shake hand, take them to lunch, then I think I can't fix that or replace that with AI. So it's this, some folks are saying, well, how do I shrink my staff? Well, no, that's not really what you should be looking at. It should be, how do I optimize my customer experience, my employees' productivity, rather than how can I do less with more?
People think AI is coming for their jobs. It's not necessarily that, right? It's people that know how to use AI are coming for their jobs. And that's been a quoted, line for a while now. But I think when you look at the difference between AI and people and the human part of our business, like anything that can be scalable, it will eventually become a commodity, right? And there's this whole craze in our industry, scale your operations, scale your sales, scale your service delivery. And what isn't scalable is that handshake.
Mm-hmm.
What isn't scalable is, that late call to the client, talking them off the cliff, right? Those things are not scalable. And it's those parts of the business that refuse to scale that I think, are going to be the most important aspects of our business going forward and the bigger differentiator for us.
I've got a neighbor pretty high up the food chain with AWS, did a TED Talk for him. And the other day I asked him, how's AI working with you guys? I've seen that y'all laid off 20 or 30,000 people over the last year or so. Is AI replacing them? He just laughed. He said, no, we're just doing 20% more work, and someone, you'd think AWS that's what they're doing with these layoffs, is that they're just fully throttling those people's jobs with AI. And he was real clear-eyed. He said, no, the work still has to be done. The humans need to be needed. Yep. We're just packing more on our shoulders than we used to.
Yeah. How has AI changed what your clients expect of you to manage and protect?
I think our clients come in very different flavors. Some of them are at the dip your toe stage. Some of them are, is this a good idea? Some of them are afraid of it. Just a lot of conversation. It's like the only channel on the radio is AI. And so I think in and of itself, there's a lot of confusion out there. And I think from a client perspective, adoption is important, trying to figure out what flavor they want to utilize, how do they govern it. There's a lot of thoughtful things coming in through them, but they're all over the map.
We have different kinds of clients, right? Some are very technical, some are not. Some are very Microsoft centric, and so they're trying to adopt Copilot. Some are very experimental and are using Claude and bringing that in. And so, like I said earlier, right, we have some adoption coming from the bottom up, and this grassroots kind of, campaign, right, with knowledge workers just grasping whatever they can. And then you've got this top-down approach with Copilot in a lot of ways. And so I think it comes back to that AI governance, model and understanding like what's being used and who's using what and to what end. And I think even to pull back a step further is, what are you trying to do with AI, right? Because we have a lot of clients that have asked us for Copilot subscriptions or access to Claude or whatever it may be. And the first question we always ask them is, why?
Well, and a lot of it has to do with the vertical, right? The law firms are not, those big, fat, expensive red books that used to fill out a library. They're not buying those anymore. They can get the same information online through a software as a service. They can search and get feedback, leveraging AI to help them build a summary. So, legal is saying, paralegal stuff, accounting and finance, the ability to look at spreadsheets and form fill, through rinse and repeat automation. We're seeing more of that. So I think a lot of it's industry driven. And then some of it is more marketing. Marketing right now, as there's a magic that you can do. Things that used to take you a week to produce, you can now leverage intelligent tools that have gotten to know you pretty well, and they've gotten to know GCS pretty well. And so it makes things work faster and smoother and cheaper for us.
Yeah, I think the expectations that clients have are not necessarily changing, but it like any technology stack, any new technology, they're expecting us to pay attention to it every day and understand it, so they don't have to, and shepherd them through it, right? And be the trail guide to help them understand the what, the how, the when, and obviously to do it securely, right? In within the arms of compliance and.
Well, and that's what GCS does, right? I don't know the workflows of my clients. I can't tell them how to best optimize the broad spectrum that is AI. That's kind of a hard thing to define, but I can help them build gutters. I can help them create a strategic roadmap. I can help them have governance and compliance. And so we're here to aid on the client's AI journey. But it is, to your point earlier, it is kind of a team sport. But, there's going to be a need to learn how to optimize that. And I think that's going to be an inside job more than something that is going to be outsourceable.
What do you think is going to change the most in regards to AI and security over the next 12 months?
I think the speed, right? I mean, you see a lot of innovation happening around us because code is so easy to deploy now. Yeah. And, there are new language models that are on the horizon, at least as of today, as we're filming this, right? Mythos has been in the news, and Mythos just being an evolution of these models, right? They're getting better and better and better. And, when we have the ability for a model to not only discover vulnerabilities, and exploit them before a human defender even has time to patch, that's a whole new world, right? That we're some would say we're already living in today. Yeah. But there's no doubt it will be here. And the hope is that, like anything else, we stay one step ahead, right? Or at least a half step ahead. And that a lot of the security tools and just the approaches and other things we use, stay one step ahead.
Have you seen AI have a conscience?
Yeah, I mean, it a little bit, right? Some of these models, it will push back and it will hallucinate, and a conscience is, I don't know what you mean by that necessarily specifically, but I think we always have to be vetting the output of what we're getting.
I see in a lot of cases, AI is this unbridled horse that's just running free and amok in its horsepower, and it's doing what it does. But it's our job to rein it in, right? And I see that as being one of the biggest opportunities for our clients as they dip their toe into AI, is making sure that they can rein in whatever they put out in the pasture.
For that business leader who is just now turning their attention to this, what should they start looking at first? What should they start paying attention to first?
I think it's, use case first of all, right? I mean, otherwise it's just noise. It's a distraction. So understanding how you're going to apply AI into your business is pretty important. I know sometimes though, you just have to get started before those light bulb moments happen, right? And so I think it's adopting it safely and securely. It's starting with pilot users and groups, starting with a clear path on like what you're going to use and who's going to use it. And then give that to people, start getting feedback and start, building from there, right? Success isn't automating everything in the business. Success is just even finding one thing, right, that you can improve and then build upon that. Yeah. But I think it is important to get started on it, right? Because standing by and doing nothing is not necessarily a strategy, right? It's just a different level of risk that you're accepting at the end of the day.
As folks start playing with it and getting started with it, are there any sort of common first mistakes that they make, any potholes that they should be looking for?
That's a good question, because these tools are moving so quickly that I would say don't get too ingrained in one particular platform or one particular approach, because they're changing constantly. And what's really changing right now is how we interact with AI, right? Claude Cowork being a good example of something you can put on your desktop now that's giving a user an experience, right? Through skills and tasks and projects and ways that they can kind of organize all those different chats together. I think that the things are moving quickly, but we're also seeing a lot of innovation in the Microsoft ecosystem too, with their partnership with Anthropic and adopting kind of that Claude Copilot, experience within Microsoft Copilot. Yeah. I think we're keeping a close eye on these things, and I think trying to understand where they're going so we can help guide our clients in the right way.
I would say, do you guys act as consultants when clients are trying to figure out which direction to walk?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of like the AI conversations that are going on right now.
I don't know that I would recommend one AI engine over another to a client. I like Microsoft because I can govern it. Most of our clients are living in the Microsoft ecosystem. I think there's a need to be a little bit patient with AI. I mean, there's a lot of squirrel chasing going on. This one has a new cool feature. I'm going to take everything that I've trained this one to do, and I'm going to go squirrel over here. Oh, wait, now there's a new bright shiny. And I think, it's as much of an opportunity as a disruption. And I think, from my standpoint, working with clients, it's really how do we block out the noise and create a strategy, a plan around it? Who owns that internally? What skill set does it need to have to be a good steward of a very, very powerful tool? But yeah, it's not just a bowl full of jelly beans that you pick out of randomly. I think you need to kind of pick your solution and be patient with it.
I think too, on the note of just how to get ready for this stuff and the new models, right, and capabilities that are evolving that can expose and exploit vulnerabilities. It comes back to fundamentals, which is a big part of what we do in our managed security service that we offer clients, and as part of that Microsoft stack, is it helps address all of those fundamentals like MFA, right? Like patching, like just general hygiene. And so if you don't have those things in place, right, you're going to be in big trouble.
Well, but AI can replicate a lot of that stuff. AI can learn my voice. Right. So when I call into my bank and it says, Marty, say this catchphrase, AI can figure out how to do that catchphrase. And so a lot of the tools that we've had historically that could stop a human from coming in, AI is also creating workarounds through that are, from a security standpoint, pretty scary.
Right, for sure.
And I think it's those fundamentals that are going to get exploited first, and those are the easiest things to go and address right now. And, there's a lot of people that have skipped those steps or are just skipping those steps and jumping right into just adopting AI, and they just want to start using it. So a big part of what we're doing now with clients is an AI readiness and enablement engagement, where we can help them understand where those guardrails are lacking right now, where they need to be, get them to where they need to be, and then thoughtfully, onboard some actual AI into the environment, into the right hands, and in a very guided way, right? That can also be governed and managed.
Yeah, there's some real curious folks, within our organization. And, Shane would come to me and say, hey, look at this really cool report. I'm like, well, where do I get that? Well, you can't, because it's over in my barn. Yeah. And then somebody else will come and say, hey, look at this cool thing that I built. I'm like, well, that's cool. How'd you? And they don't talk to each other, right? And so I got these great outcomes going on, but they're not collaborative.
Yeah, they're built in silos.
And, we're trying to work as a team, and that's an antagonist to teamwork when everybody's writing a different, methodology.
How do you get around that?
Well, and that's a great point. I'm glad you brought it up, because there isn't a great way around it right now. And I think that's indicative of this is an emerging technology. It's bleeding edge. And so if you look at Claude Cowork or even Microsoft Copilot and their version of Cowork, they're all in beta mode right now, right? And Marty's exactly right. Like, we've built some, and we've seen this across other customer environments too, where, individually you have a lot of great innovation going on, but this pretty dashboard that's super helpful, well, darn, it can only run on my machine. Like, there's not currently a good way to save that and export that or centrally publish that, right? Short of going and creating an app and GitHub and public, just all these traditional steps that you would normally take. Yeah. That's kind of goes against the premise of the ease of use of these tools. Is I don't want to have to go code a dashboard and then publish it and then update the code. Like, I just want to be able to pull that data live, have it be modifiable very easily and shareable across the organization. So the idea of taking like all of these things and creating a portal, right, is something we're looking at doing right now. But again, there's some like build your own stuff going on there. There's some third-party products that we'd have to bring in to really make that work. And meanwhile, we'll spend the next 3 months, if we were to build this out, and in 3 months, it'll be there natively in one of these tools, likely, right? Yeah. And so do we spend the time and effort to go build that out now? Maybe, maybe not, right? And this is a good example, one of many, that as you start getting deeper into using these tools every day, you start discovering these walls. And I think that's an important part of the process, is like, okay, this worked really great. I could sell this to a customer. Like, this is an outcome. I want to go stand on top of the mountaintop and shout about how cool this was. Yeah. But then there's also all these other brick walls I hit. And again, like, yeah, this is a great thing I built, but I can't share it.
Yeah.
And certainly these things are going to be fixed at some point, right? You've got all these models again, and that I think the innovation layer right now, where a lot of the engineering is happening and kind of the race right now, is that layer on top of these models that allow you to interact, allow you to build a thing and share it easily, securely with your team.
Well, and I think that's back to why you standardize on a specific platform, and why you need to be patient with it, because it's always going to be, Daytona 500 is a race, right? But the people that win Daytona 500 are incredibly patient. It's the folks that try to get a pass on the outside that spin out and burn. And so it's this blend of momentum, and I got to get to the finish line before my customers do or my competitors do. But by the same token, if you're not patient, you can crash and now you're out of the race.
It's a good analogy. For folks who are currently using an MSP or who are thinking about, partnering with an MSP, what are sort of the conversations that you would encourage those people to have with their MSP?
Every MSP has, all of us MSPs, we all have the same certs. You go to our websites, we all say we do cloud, we do AI, we do security, right? We all do that. How do we differentiate, I think, is can your MSP or the one you're looking at hiring, can they answer the harder questions, right? Are they there for you when you really need them? Are they a partner? Are they reactive? Or are they calling you to let you know something bad is going on, right? Versus reacting to it. And there's really 3 questions that I would ask. If you have an MSP today, or you're looking at hiring an MSP, what's changed in my environment in the last 30 days? That's a great question. Because if they can't tell you that, they're just a vendor sending you an invoice. They're not a partner. What's the biggest risk in my business right now? If they don't know that, they're not paying it close enough attention. And the third question that I would ask is, what am I not doing today that I should be doing? Are there recommendations you've made that I haven't taken? There's just a lot of stuff that gets left on the table and in between conversations. And especially when you're dealing with, an MSP that is just more reactive, right? And so it comes back down to the people business and really paying attention to how these customers make their money, and building trust. And sometimes that means, and we've run into this many, many times, where client thought they needed to spend $100,000 on whatever it was, and they don't. And we tell them they don't. And we could have taken that check to the bank, right? And instead we didn't. We made less money or no money, but guess what? They're a client for a decade now. That's the math, right? Yeah. That's the real math that we're looking at. And again, going back to the pieces of business that aren't scalable, the handshakes, the late night phone calls.
I think cultures within businesses are going to have to come up at the executive level to how does this transform our culture. I know some of my competitors have just leveraged the automation, the relationship out of the automation, and then because why wouldn't they? I can outsource offshore, or I can use AI and I can create this technical bureaucracy that makes it harder for me to get to, but it reduces my overhead. And then in some cases, it's like, no, it's a compliment. So I think companies kind of have to ask themselves, where do our clients and where do the people that we serve, and how do they want to transact with us? And for some customers, automation is great. They're not really in the people business. But for others, you really got to be careful, because you don't want to lose that identity that you've built from a goodwill perspective of being accessible.
Yeah. And we're making a big bet on that. And we're equally making a bet on the AI and the technology side of the business too. I mean, that's really important. As we kind of touched on earlier, AI is helping us provide a better client experience, right? And so if we can automate some of those commoditized pieces, then we can spend more time doing the handshakes. We can spend more time doing the lunches. We can spend more time sitting across the table. And those are the people that, to your point earlier, getting in front of the keyboard.
Well, a really good example is it's really expensive for us to build quotes and estimates for our clients.
Yeah.
And historically, sometimes they need an assessment, and it's a paid assessment. We don't have enough data, but as a rule, when we're building a roadmap or building recommendations for our client, There's a lot of human resource that goes into that, but a lot of this stuff is rinse and repeatable. And so, we're playing with the ability to take our scope of works and our quotes that we've historically done and incorporate them into machine learning with AI. And now, instead of everything being a unique quote, my cost to sell can go down, and that's going to make me more competitively priced with my competition because I could take all that historical information. Great use case for making people more productive. Great use case and a way for me to reduce cost. But by the same token, I still have a person that's going to shuttle that information back and forth. Then I am still going to peer review it with a person as well. I'm not going to just trust without
quality control still comes down to the human in the loop.
Right. Human on the loop and in the loop at some point, right? We will never automate, or at least in the foreseeable future, we're not looking to automate the customer experience at all.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, other than little email autoresponders and things like that are pretty mundane. But when it comes to the relationship building part of the business, I mean, we have clients that have been with us for 15, 20 years. Yeah. And they're not with us because of price or because of technology.
It's a certain level of service expectation.
They're there because when there's something really bad going on, they know they can call Marty. They know they can call me. They're getting a response from our team throughout the day, right? In the evenings, like we're there to take care of them. Yeah. And then we're also there to tell them when they don't need to spend that money and when they do need to spend that money. Yeah. Right.
Final question. If someone's dealing with these AI and security questions right now, what do you think is the first thing they should start with? Where should they begin that exploration?
I think the why, is what do we, when I hire an employee, I build a job description. When I put a bot to work, I need to build a job description for it. I need to know what its responsibilities are, who it's going to report to, how success is going to be measured. And so I think that there's a correlation to human resources in AI and bot.
Yeah, all the way down to security.
Right. And so I think it's the why, and then it should almost look like a job description or product development, and it should be templatized in some form or fashion. So we always have a place that we could reflect to make sure that we're not off track.
It's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, have a plan, understand the why. That's a big part of it. And understand what are you trying to get out of this? Have a way to measure success, because we see a lot of people just going in and adopting AI or at least purchasing AI, subscriptions and just not really getting any results out of it.
Guys, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for making the time today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Lance.